Okay, let's get back to our email questions. We're talking about car and truck wrecks, and Vance sent in a very interesting and specific question that I think people really need to know about. His question goes a little something like this. I heard about a wreck where the car driver, well, one driver had a heart attack and lost control and crashed into somebody else. What happens if that happens because of circumstances that you couldn't control? Are you liable as a driver who had the wreck, or because they were traveling, or if somebody was texting or speeding or something like that? Is that a different set of circumstances? So I'm curious to know, Harry, what happens if something that happens beyond your control happens while you're driving, like a heart attack or a stroke? We hear about these things happening all the time. People go into diabetic situations, and they're behind the wheel of a car and an accident happens. Who's to blame, or how do you handle a situation like that?
Yeah, these are called sudden medical emergency cases. And a colleague of mine here actually just settled a case 2 days ago where there was a claim of a sudden medical emergency. And in that case, you basically have to look at what is the alleged sudden medical emergency. So in the question, we have a heart attack. In this particular case that my colleague had, someone said that they had a severe migraine that ended up causing them to pass out and have the wreck. And what you want to look for, there are some people that drive that they have diabetic seizures, or they have a history of seizures. That's a little bit different than someone who has for instance, a sudden heart attack out of the blue that they didn't know of. So it's a case by case basis. You look at the person's medical history. I think you need to look at whether or not this is a person who's driving around that has recurrent seizures or things like that. Frequently, that's different than someone who literally just out of the blue has a medical emergency, because you don't want, everybody could driving a car that gets into a wreck and say, you know what, I passed out. There's nothing I could have done about it. And that would be a defense in every single case. Well, that's not the law. Okay. So we have to have some kind of something to go by in order to look at, well, the jury's going to hear the facts of this person has a history of, their medical condition of X, Y, and Z. Well, they knew or should have known. So you can still put fault on somebody, even though they have a seizure, for instance, if they had that kind of a medical history that's always recurring. But somebody who has something out of the blue, of course, it's going to be harder because there's nothing they could have done. So you really got to look at the circumstances and the medical history. And once they raise that defense, because normally, you get into a car accident, they say, well, you caused the wreck. They can't just go in your past medical history. But when you bring it up as a defense, you open the door. And so then the plaintiff can turn around and say, well, let's look at your past medical history to see if you've had any other incidents like this before.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's why they need to call you, Harry. That's exactly why they should get